Hello, everybody. This is Chuck Wiger. I'm at the state capitol with my good friend, fellow state senator Dave Tomassoni. Uh, Dave, you have been serving in the legislature for a number of years. You've been in the House of Representatives, and you've got so many perspectives. And I think for our viewers to know that we work together. Ultimately, we may have our own districts, but we are state legislators, and to get things done, we need to work as a team. And I've really got to enjoy you as to the perspective that you bring.
Well, and you have a very unique perspective, and you have a lot of world experience that helps a lot when it comes to treating people and addressing the issues that we meet in the legislature. And I've found that I have a companion with you, that we can trust each other and we can do things together regardless of whether or not I'm from the north and you're from down in the metro area. And some of our issues are a little bit different, but at the same time, like you said, if we don't show support for each other, then how do we get to the finish line? And oftentimes we're seeing that at the end of the legislative session where while the parties are different, somewhere in the middle there has to be a compromise, and somewhere people, whether they are on the far left or on the far right, they have to realize that the state of Minnesota is in the middle.
And I believe it's Humphrey that once said, the art of the legislative process is compromise. At some point, you need to reach an agreement. And so that's what we're working on right now, and it's a continual challenge as we go ahead. So that's before us, but I'd like to share just a little bit, if you could, about your background. And you're from the range, excuse me, and there's so many visual reminders of that in your great office where we're at right now. But tell us about that path. You're born in Minnesota, though I know you speak Italian fluently, and we'll get to that. But tell us about that path.
Well, as you know, my Senate district is Senate District 6, which is the Iron Range, the Central Iron Range, but it's about 150 miles from corner to corner. So it goes all the way from Big Fork almost all the way down to Duluth, and then from Hoyt Lakes all the way down to past Floodwood. But
that's a big district. You said 150
miles from corner to
now,
corner.
My district would go about 6 miles.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
You guys can door knock in one day. We can't even find all our houses in one day, which is kind of funny. But my core district is there's 6 taconite plants on the Iron Range, and 5 of them are in my district. And so my main industry is mining, and then logging is probably the second biggest one.
And you were born, was it Bemidji?
Well, I was born in Bemidji. My dad was a machinist, and he had started a machine shop up in Bemidji. And so apparently the family was there for about 5 years, and when I was born, they moved back to Hibbing. He then went back to school. He was one of the first non-traditional students, I think. He went back to school in like 1954 with 3 children in tow, and ended up at Michigan Tech, got his mechanical engineering degree at Michigan Tech, and came back to Minnesota and went to work for Hannah Mining Company.
Great.
And
mechanical engineering.
Mechanical engineering, and he ended up being a maintenance superintendent at the end of his career. And through all that, I started playing hockey, and hockey took me to the University of Denver, where
you graduated from Hibbing?
I graduated from Chisholm.
Or Chisholm, excuse me.
And one of our claims to fame is that we beat Hibbing in hockey that year. So that was one thing that we never let them forget. Because I tell people all the time, if you think knocking down the Berlin Wall was difficult, you should see the wall between Hibbing and Chisholm. But at any rate, after Denver University, I graduated from Denver University, and I went over to Italy to play hockey. And that's actually where I learned Italian. I didn't learn Italian at home because they only spoke Italian when they didn't want us to understand what they were saying.
Okay.
And so that's where I learned Italian.
And just for the record, you just can't go to Italy and say I'd like to try out for the team. You have Italian descent, and so there's a threshold requirement.
Well, and there was 2 threshold requirements. One was somebody had to want you.
Yes.
And it would be okay to be a foreigner to play on some of the teams if you were the one they picked. But in my case, they wanted me because I had Italian heritage and I could play as an Italian.
Yes.
So that gave them an extra foreigner, basically speaking. And so that made the team a little bit stronger. And I did that initially. My plan was to do it for 1 year. And
This
quit.
1980?
This was 1975.
75.
Yes,
Okay.
and my plan was to. I thought maybe I could play pro, but I realized
That's
that
a
wasn't
realistic aspiration.
Yep, and that didn't happen. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll play hockey for 1 year in Italy. I'll I'll travel the country.
How old are you
I'll
at
see
that
the
point,
relatives.
75?
I'm 22 years old.
Okay.
And well, 1 year turned into 2, and 2 years turned into 3, and I ended up staying there for 16 years.
Wow.
And ended up getting married, not over there here, but I had my children along the way, and ended up playing in the 1984 Olympics for the Italian team. And there's a cute little YouTube clip you could probably find. If I have I shown it to you yet?
Several times.
Okay.
No. I do, but share that with our viewers. I did see it once, and
this is well, I scored a goal in the Olympics against the Russians right about the same time as my child was being born.
scored a goal against the Russians.
Yes, against the Russians. And my son Danny was being born in the Hibbing Hospital about exactly the same time. So it was Dick
Wow.
Schaap from ABC called it 2/3 of a hat trick.
Tell us about that goal.
Oh, well, it was actually one of these kind of shots I planned. People won't believe this, but we got these new sticks, and I could really feel the puck really well. I could handle the puck really well, but every time I'd shoot with the stick, I would aim for that corner, and the puck would go to that corner. And so I started thinking, well, I'm not going to get any shots against the Russians, so handling the puck is way more important than shooting the puck. And so sure enough, all of a sudden I got the puck, I'm walking down the slot, I can't believe I'm in the slot against the Russians, and I go high left, and the goalie jumped, and the puck went low right, and it went in the net.
What a thrill, and then new life and for the family.
Yeah,
so
so it was
so
fun,
congratulations on that milestone. That's
that
a
was fun. That was
very
fun.
select club.
Don't worry, and I keep getting reminded about it from my wife because I wasn't there when the kid was born. But
Okay. So how much longer then were you in Italy?
I stayed till about 1991, and then I got into the insurance business, and then in the meantime I ended up running for office, and I won the seat for the
So
House
you
of Representatives.
relocated to?
I would go over to Italy for the hockey season and come back to Chisholm. So I stayed always back in the United States in the summertime, played softball or something, and then when I got done with my hockey career, I got into insurance, and I actually ran for county commissioner in 1988, but lost.
Okay.
And I don't know if you ever lost an election, but it's the worst.
I haven't, but
It's the worst experience.
the
you could
fear of
ever have.
losing is sometimes a big motivator
Maybe,
or
yeah,
a stronger one the next
good,
time.
because it's terrible to lose. And I actually decided I was never going to get back in politics again because it was such a bad experience. And then in 1992 I ran for the House of Representatives and won. And
You learn things in
exactly.
losing too, as long as you remember that lesson.
Exactly. And one of the lessons I learned was that if you're going to win on the Iron Range and you're from Chisholm, there can't be two people from Chisholm in the race. There can only be one person from Chisholm in the race, and that helped me win the primary, and then I won the general election. But I was in the House for 8 years, and then I had the opportunity.
What was your
to come to the
platform?
Senate.
Do you remember when you made your pitch?
We were no, I don't. But I know.
Jobs, perhaps?
We were the mining industry has always been cyclical.
Yes.
And so, in fact, my dad was in the mining industry for 22 years, and he was basically forced to retire in the early 80s because the mining industry was going through a downswing. In fact, we had about 16,000 people working in the mining industry in the early 80s, and today we have less than 4,000. And that big drop went from 16,000 in the early 80s to like 3,000 in like 1985. And then it came back up in '86 and started coming back, but we've never really gotten back to the big numbers because now the trucks are bigger and the shovels are bigger, and so the production is just more massive, and they produce just about the same amount of tonnage. But the ups and downs of the industry were always really a hard thing to judge, and they're a hard thing to live with because people lose their jobs, and they get their jobs back, and then they lose their jobs, and then they get their jobs back, and so trying to deal with that is probably one of the things that's the hardest thing for that area.
So you are elected then, and what year? You first elected?
92 was the year I was
To
elected.
the legislature. And were you still doing insurance at the
I did
same
insurance.
time?
I did
What, and
insurance.
what aspect of insurance? Property, casualty, and health, and the whole package? Or?
No, I was doing life insurance and,
Life?
and property and casualty, and I actually had my Series 7 license, so I was selling annuities also.
There's
And
much more rigor there. So
And one of the things people don't understand about the legislature, it's very, very time consuming.
Yes.
So I stayed with the insurance for about 4 or 5 more years, but I found that because I was devoting so much time to this job, I was having a real hard time actually servicing the clients and getting new clientele. And you know, the insurance industry doesn't like if you don't produce. So I decided to retire from that. And then I've kind of been a full-time legislator ever since.
So over the years, you've had a number of key pieces of legislation, for your district. You are very, very active on so many things. Would you like to identify some of the top accomplishments that you'd like to say?
We'll do just the most recent one, and it was it was a pretty interesting. It was a solar industry bill. It was a made in Minnesota solar.
Yes.
And it's actually it was passed. It was for giving incentives for people to buy solar panels that are made in Minnesota.
Yep.
And as with a lot of things around here, it didn't come out exactly as we wanted it to, but it got to the finish line, and the incentive was basically for a solar manufacturing plant, solar panel manufacturing plant on the Iron Range, which started up and it was going really well. And then because of a whole bunch of different things that happened, because of politics and because of people's interpretations of laws, the plant on the Iron Range didn't go real well. And now this Minnesota Made thing is having a little bit of a blip, and it's going the wrong direction. And so this is one of these things where we're trying to revive it and figure out a way to go to the next step. So this stuff is always really interesting. As you know, sometimes you carry legislation to the finish line, and the next year all of a sudden it's changing, and people's needs change and that type of stuff. So I've always found that the interesting thing about the legislature is that just when you think you've got a handle on it, it tricks you.
Yes. So you need to be engaged, you need to network, and that means with all legislators, or you've got to work with both parties, within your own party and even within the Democratic Party. It's a big tent in terms of points of view, as you know, and then working with the Republicans, sometimes you may find more common ground on a particular issue with the other political party. It depends on the issue, I suppose.
There's two groups here, and the philosophies are miles apart, but quite frankly, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the middle that we're really close on.
Yeah.
And personalities and individuals are probably the most important part of our job here, because if you get to know people, oftentimes you can get things done just because you have a relationship. And so it doesn't really matter if it's on the Democratic side of the aisle or the Republican side of the aisle. It's sometimes just these interpersonal relationships are really important.
Yes.
Here's one that is kind of one that people don't know about, but Minnesota is one of the few states in the country that does this. We passed a law along with Representative Rukavina that requires that all flags, all American United States flags, sold in Minnesota must be made in the USA.
And that's United States of America, not USA as in another country.
Right, exactly. So they had, and we did that because back in 2001, when the 9/11 happened, everybody was waving American flags. And almost all of them were made in China, and so that's when we decided this is not right. If we're going to promote the United States, we should promote that. And we attempt to make all of our bonding projects or all of our construction projects. We attempt to put some type of products must be made in USA in order to fund these projects. And I think some of that stuff is a big key to. Well, if you've been paying attention to the iron mining industry of late, you'll find that. As a result of these tariffs that were put on foreign dumped steel, all those